There should be some sort of paper flow that the committee, the Congress, the public can look at in invoking Title 10, Section 12.
The room fell silent as Senator Shatz leaned forward, his voice cutting through the tension. Is the United States being invaded by a foreign nation? The question was stark, jarring, a chilling reminder of how quickly fear can turn into policy. With troops already deployed on American streets, the line between national security and political theater began to blur. As military forces were mobilized under vague orders, the stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just about California. It was about the very foundation of democracy and whether the people could trust their leaders to act with transparency or exploit power for personal gain.
Have been issued, which are publicly available and known, relate to an ongoing situation in Los Angeles, which could expand to other places. But it's quite easy to point out that there has been an invasion of 21 million illegals in our country.
What had begun as a response to local unrest in California now held the potential to become a much larger and more concerning precedent. Could this be the start of a new trend in which military forces are sent into cities across the country without clear, specific justifications? If so, how would such a move impact the balance between security and civil liberties? These were questions Schatz seemed determined to explore. At the heart of the inquiry was a request for clarity on the legal grounds and geographical scope of the military deployment. Schatz asked whether the orders issued applied specifically to Los Angeles, to California more broadly, or whether they could extend across the country. General Kane responded, acknowledging that the orders related to the ongoing situation in Los Angeles. However, he also noted that the situation could expand if necessary, implying that the action taken could extend beyond one state or even one city. The broader issue here was the application of Title 10, Section 12,406, a law that outlines the conditions under which National Guard units and the military can be mobilized. Schatz pressed for more transparency on the matter, suggesting that the public, Congress, and the committee should have access to a clearer picture of the rationale behind such decisions. He argued that the orders that allowed for the deployment of troops in Los Angeles should be backed by clear documentation, showing exactly what conditions warranted such a drastic action. What Schatz seemed to be suggesting was that this order, and others like it, needed to be fully accountable. The American people, along with lawmakers, should be able to examine the details, see who made the decisions, and understand the circumstances that led to the military's involvement in domestic matters. Without such documentation, the line between legitimate national security measures and unwarranted power grabs could quickly become blurred. The situation in Los Angeles with its escalating unrest was indeed serious, but it was also not entirely unprecedented. The presence of undocumented immigrants in the country was a long-standing issue, one that had evolved over decades. The claim made during the hearing that the country was being invaded by millions of illegal immigrants seemed to conflate the complexities of immigration policy with immediate threats of military action. While there were certainly security concerns related to immigration and border control, it was essential to differentiate between a political narrative and the real challenges of governing in a democratic society. Schatz's question wasn't just about Los Angeles, it was about ensuring that the response to national issues, especially ones that could potentially affect civil liberties, was proportionate and transparent. The senator wasn't dismissing the concerns surrounding national security, but was calling for a more methodical, fact-based approach to governance. Fear-mongering and exaggerated claims about rebellion or foreign invasion did nothing to address the underlying issues, whether that be immigration, civil unrest, or national security. The heart of the matter was ensuring that any action taken, particularly those involving military force on American soil, was justified and transparent. If lawmakers were going to debate these serious decisions, they needed to do so with full access to the necessary documentation and facts. Without that, decisions made in the name of national security could quickly slip into political theater with consequences far beyond what was necessary to address the actual issues at hand. The hearing continued with a shift in focus, as Senator Shatz pressed further on the military orders in question. He aimed to clarify the exact scope and authority behind the deployment of troops in Los Angeles. His main concern was whether the orders, which had initially been issued for California, could be applied more broadly, potentially to other parts of the country. If the legal framework allowed such broad applications, it raised questions about the potential for military involvement in civilian matters without clear and specific justifications. Schatz's line of questioning was a reflection of broader concerns about executive power and transparency. The orders, he argued, lacked the kind of specificity necessary for proper oversight. If a situation arose in another state that required additional troops, would the same vague order be applied, or would new directives be issued based on the situation at hand? He asked if, for example, a governor in Kansas could decide to deploy the National Guard based on the existing orders, or whether new justification would be needed. General Kane's responses, though detailed, continued to skirt the key issue. He reiterated that the initial deployment of 2,000 troops in California was followed by another 2,000 troops to meet what he referred to as the growing need. The response seemed to focus more on the ongoing nature of the situation rather than offering clarity about the specific legal justification behind the action. There was no clear threshold mentioned that justified the additional deployment of troops, nor was there a defined limit to how far the orders could extend. The senator pushed back, emphasizing that the American public deserved clarity on the matter. Without clear documentation explaining the reasons for sending more troops or the legal framework behind such decisions, it was impossible to determine whether the response was proportionate or politically motivated. Without this level of transparency, the public could not make informed judgments about the appropriateness of military deployments on domestic soil. Schatz's insistence on transparency wasn't a critique of the military's actions or the seriousness of the situation in California. Rather, it was a call for accountability. He highlighted the dangers of vague orders, noting that such ambiguity could lead to the erosion of democratic checks and balances. If the government could mobilize troops with little documentation or explanation, it could set a precedent for similar actions in the future, undermining the ability of Congress, the courts, and the public to scrutinize those decisions. The senator also touched on the political implications of the situation, pointing to the rhetoric that framed the country as under threat from undocumented immigrants. The discussion turned to the 21 million people who had crossed the border illegally, according to the claims made during the hearing. While this issue was undoubtedly one that needed addressing, Schatz was quick to point out that the border crisis had been building for decades. It wasn't a new problem, it was a complicated issue, deeply intertwined with economic and humanitarian concerns. Schatz rejected the framing of the crisis as an invasion and argued that fear-mongering only exacerbated the situation. He suggested that, rather than relying on dramatic narratives, lawmakers should push for comprehensive immigration reform, which would balance security concerns with the need for a functioning and humane immigration system. The senator believed that the focus should be on long-term solutions that address the root causes of immigration, rather than relying on military force or fear-based rhetoric to solve the issue. The debate around military deployments and the use of National Guard troops in civil disturbances became a key point of contention. Schatz's position was clear: any use of military force on American soil should be subject to rigorous scrutiny and a transparent process. He argued that if the military was to be used in domestic situations, the public, Congress, and the courts should all have access to the relevant documentation, allowing for an informed and balanced debate. The conversation then veered towards an unexpected subject: foreign gifts. Schatz questioned whether the Department of Defense had been in communication with the Qatari government regarding a gift of an aircraft, which could be modified for presidential use. While General Kane sidestepped specific details, Schatz raised concerns about the potential implications of such a gift. He questioned the constitutionality of accepting large-scale assets from foreign governments, warning that it opened the door for undue foreign influence. The senator demanded that all documentation related to these dealings be made available to the public to ensure accountability and prevent corruption. The legal issue of foreign gifts was not a minor one. As Schatz pointed out, it was crucial to understand who initiated these conversations and what the implications might be for American sovereignty and security. If the government accepted gifts of this magnitude without proper oversight, it could lead to significant political and legal consequences. Schatz's call for transparency was not limited to military orders or foreign gifts. He framed the issue as one of fundamental democratic accountability. In a democracy, decisions about national security, military deployments, and foreign influence should never be shrouded in secrecy. Instead, the public must have access to the information necessary to assess whether these decisions are in the best interest of the nation.